Oh, welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Balls on Twitter. What are you up to, you big Tennessee homer?
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Oh, man, we got a show lined up for the folks, Shane. We got Mike Griffith from DawgNation kind enough to join the show. We haven't spoke with him, Shane, since SEC Media Days, and man, he delivered the goods. He, of course, covers the Georgia Bulldogs for DawgNation, talking about the big game here. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I think I've officially polished off all the fun-sized Snickers in the East Tennessee, so that's good. Yeah. You know, I was joking about my Bama walks. I said it's a lot easier when they're handing out candy. You know? So, no, we had a big old purge today. I said, we got to get this shit out of the house. I said, it just defeats the purpose. But, yeah, so my blood sugar's starting to regulate a little bit, and I'm starting to feel a lot better. I'm napping more, but, you know.
Well, yeah, that sounds right about the way I know you well, Shane. But
yeah. You remember John? His first job was at, if anybody's never heard of Dollywood, it's a theme park here in East Tennessee, ran by no other than Dolly Parton, the queen of country music. And she opened up a water park, Splash Country, and my brother, I'll never forget. First time, because we're the same. It's just he's got a lot of metabolism going, you know. So he's never had the weight issues that I always say he's the exact opposite. He's tall, skinny, and ugly, you know. And my brother, he gets this gig, and I think he gets a $130 paycheck, and he goes to Ingles and he buys everything on aisle 2, which is the candy aisle. Everything from pinwheels to what was that? What did he used to do? Those little. Oh, that was the caramel ones, Sugar Daddies. You remember them? Oh, it's the worst candy ever made. But I swear to God, that kid went through it and didn't even gain a pound. I ate like one little pinwheel, and next thing you know, I'm 5 pounds heavier. So I always think about that when I purge on candy. It's like, man, my brother, he used to be able to do this and the next day, but he spent his whole paycheck on that thing. I'll never forget about it. So Flying Hawaiian, just thinking about you this morning.
Yeah, well, I don't know how to top that, Shane. I don't even know how to transition from it. But you're talking about taking a nap. That's kind of what I like to do during the weekly SEC coaches teleconference. It's usually pretty boring. But the highlight, week in, week out, Lane Kiffin. You know, I found even an old clip, Shane. I don't know if you remember this years ago. We played it on the show. I even tweeted it out. That's what jogged my memory. He was going to the bathroom and flushed the toilet during the teleconference. I mean, so Lane Kiffin is always up for something. And on this appearance, Shane, he was asked about the Auburn job, his interest, because everybody's seeing the rumors and all that. And he was even asked, how about old Deion Sanders? How do you think he would do if he got the Auburn job? Let's kick it over to Lane Kiffin.
Hey, Lane. As someone who appears to be well-versed in the musings of the Internet, I'm sure you've seen your name listed as a potential candidate for the Auburn job. If Auburn were to be interested in you, would you have interest in them?
Yeah, we don't really comment on those things, and you know they happen every year a lot of times, and all they are is a product of players performing well and assistant coaches. So we're extremely happy here. Got something really special going. Have great support here from administration and the chancellor. So. And we're just trying to get better to get ready to play the best program in, you know, the last 10 years of college football coming in here.
Yeah, hey, Coach. In addition to your name, Deion Sanders has come up quite a lot for these Power 5 jobs, being right down the road. What have you seen from him as a coach, and how do you think he would fare at one of these bigger jobs?
I think he'd do great. I think that's a great name, and they should hire him. Great recruiter, great name. You know, this is a different world we're in now, because recruiting has always been important, but now you have the portal, so you have kids that you can change a roster faster than you ever could before. And you can lose a roster faster than you ever could before. So the ability to hire like Dion and have that name right away and portal people wanting to come play for him right away, you can flip a roster where before, realistically, it would take 2 to 3 years to truly turn a roster around. You can do it immediately. You see teams get depleted and then just, look completely different the next year. Like our team. I mean, picture our team without the portal and take those guys out of there and look what it looks like.
All right, Shane. So, hey, leave it to Lane Kiffin to be essentially a candidate for a job if you believe the internet rumors, and yet he's stumping for someone else to get the job, and what an amazing job Dion would do at Auburn. He's one of a kind, isn't he?
Absolutely, man. And it's not the first time. Lane likes to troll. He likes to play these things. Even if he's not going to Auburn, he's definitely going to play around. He did it with Tennessee. If you remember when that job was open, he'd tweet out stupid stuff with Tennessee and, little Snapchat things. And that's just what Kiffin does. But I kind of wanted to ask you something, because it has been weighing on me, because I've been there, Ole Miss fans. You're afraid that your coach is just going to leave in the middle of the night. And every time a high-profile job pops open, Lane Kiffin will always be at the top of the list if he's remaining down there in Ole Miss. So I wanted to ask you, Mike, what does Ole Miss have to do to keep Lane in Oxford?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I did kind of want to hit on that, Shane. I don't know. Do you follow this account, Message Board Geniuses, on Twitter?
Yeah, I do.
So they posted one out, and I got to be honest, I got no idea if this is true, but someone just posted it on one of these message boards, and Message Board Geniuses, if you don't follow it, go follow that account. They're great. They retweeted it. But I do know for a fact, Shane, Jimmy Sexton, the most powerful man in college football, super agent. He's the agent for Lane Kiffin. He is the agent for Jimbo Fisher and basically every coach in the SEC except for Harsin, who got fired. So give you an indication of how powerful that Jimmy Sexton is. He was at the game last week, Shane, when it was Ole Miss at A&M. And according to this poster that Message Board Geniuses tweeted out, he says, my buddy works down there. He was in the tunnel. Lane saw Jimmy Sexton, and Lane joked, "What are you doing here, Jimmy? You negotiating the buyout for Jimbo Fisher?" Oh. So again, I don't know if that's true, but I do know for a fact Jimmy Sexton was down there. And the only reason I'm bringing this full circle, Shane, I'm not just kicking Jimbo to kick him. They knew this was coming. Everybody and their mother knew Brian Harsin was going to get fired this year.
Right.
Barring some, a 10-2 type season, or, he would have to have an incredible year. Everybody knew he was out. And what have we been hearing all off season from Kiffin, Shane? NIL. We're getting outbid. He said it last week on the call. Texas A&M outbid us for DJ Durkin. He's been railing about NIL and the recruiting and how they, the salary cap or whatever term he used for A&M. He's noted fans. They've got the longest winning streak in Vaught Hemingway Stadium in 50 years. And the fans are not supporting it. He is laying the groundwork, Shane, I think, to let Ole Miss know, hey, you've never had a coach in recent history as successful as I am. We're not putting the money in the NIL. We're not selling out the stadium. I'm not sitting here saying that he's suggesting that he's gone, because a lot of people are putting 2 and 2 together. But I'm saying if they do not support this program with NIL, increase NIL, get those donations flying in, don't start buying tickets, and we're talking SEC games they're having a hard time selling out. If they're not buying tickets, they're telling him they're not committed to the program. So why in the hell would he stay? So I think he's laying the groundwork for that. And if nothing else, Shane, why, again, I bring up Jimmy Sexton, why he was at that game, because they knew Brian Harsin was going to be getting fired here shortly. And I guarantee you, Jimmy Sexton and Lane Kiffin had a talk and said, what's your price, brother? Because whether you stay at Ole Miss, whether you go to Auburn, whether you go any other school, we are getting you a big pay bump. And again, if you look at just the last 2 seasons, Shane, there's Alabama, there's Georgia, 2 titans of college football, and then there's Ole Miss right there with the 3rd best record in the SEC over the last 2 years. Lane Kiffin deserves anything that's coming his way, don't you think?
Absolutely, and he did it the right way, Mike. Don't get me wrong. Nothing hurt more than my head coach leaving the University of Tennessee in the middle of the night, Monty hiding underneath the desk, couches burning in the streets. That was tough, man, and it became a national spectacle, and I really think that it was a black eye for Lane Kiffin for a long, long time. And then, of course, things didn't work out at USC, but he didn't aggressively do it the wrong way. That's what I was wondering. I always wondered about Lane. He could have jumped to the NFL. He could have hid for a little bit. He got right back to work. He went to the Saban rehab. He goes down there to FAU, bides his time, gets an opportunity to come into the SEC. And then what does he do with that opportunity? He's putting together a couple of 10-win seasons potentially. So I think he has earned the money and he's earned the opportunity at the big table. But I'm just curious, Mike. When we talk big tables, is Auburn part of that big table anymore? Because when I think about the situation, it was a clown show last year with the way that they handled the Brian Harsin rumor mill, and I don't think Malzahn was handled properly, and so I don't know taking that job. If I'm Lane Kiffin, everything I've done to this point is, I think, for that key position, that blue chip program. And don't get me wrong, there's NIL money at the Plains, there's salary money at the Plains, but there's also a guaranteed game against Alabama. There's a guaranteed game against Georgia every single year. And I'm not convinced that they fix the booster situation in one offseason. So I don't think that is a tier 1 job right now. Am I wrong, or am I overthinking it?
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Shane. That's what I was going to say. As long as Auburn is playing Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, arguably the 2 best coaches annually, that's a tough job. Now,
absolutely,
here in a couple years, Shane, they're probably, we know basically that they're doing away with divisions. So that may be a thing of the past here very shortly. Nick Saban, who knows how much longer he's going to be at Alabama. The moment he steps down, that job's a lot more attractive. So I would say historically Auburn is a better job than Ole Miss, but right now I could easily argue Lane's in the better spot to keep on winning at Ole Miss. Now, the only there's one little wild card in here, Shane. If he, there's so many of these coaching contracts, and I don't know if they're here to stay, because it seems like a lot of these are blowing up in the school's faces, but we're seeing these 10-year deals, $90 million, $100 million, all this. It's illegal in the state of Mississippi to give someone a contract longer than 4 years. Ooh. So if Auburn says, they may not give him $100 million, but they may say, here's 8 years, $80 million. Right. It's against the law for Ole Miss to even try to match that. So that is a little wild card to keep in your back pocket. I mean, if you want long-term financial stability, that could hinder you in getting in keeping Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss.
And when you're thinking of key jobs that Lane Kiffin would potentially look at, I would think, obviously LSU would have been one. I think he would have went down there if he got the opportunity. But that Texas A&M job, who knows? Sexton knows what's going on, and if there's an opportunity at the end of the season that they're going to make a move, I would think Lane Kiffin would be aware of that to hang loose, because I could see Texas A&M going after him, and that would be an ideal location for Lane Kiffin. What do you think about Oklahoma?
Well, let me just stop you there, Shane.
Okay.
Because I don't think that's even going to be that good a job when they jump in the SEC.
Okay, all right.
Here's the path if I'm Lane. If I believe I can keep winning, and I don't think there's any indication that he can't keep winning, because he's got a young quarterback. He's got a stud freshman running back. I mean, he's finding these guys. He's the portal king for a reason. So it's like a little mini NFL franchise down there. I'd stay, and this has been said before, but I'm going to reiterate it, because I think as more time goes on, the more likely it is, Shane.
I know where you're going.
You wait out Nick Saban and you take over at Alabama. And I think, hell, we just saw it. I mean, he's calling out Jimbo here. He's saying Nick Saban, my buddy. He's calling my buddy out. They may have not had the best relationship when they were working together, but I think they're a lot closer than people really understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Nick Saban would give his blessing for Lane Kiffin to take over that job. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think that would be the dream job for Kiffin, short of USC. Obviously, they're not calling anytime soon, but I really do. I think when I'm Texas, A&M, maybe even Texas, if that job popped open with Steve Sarkisian leaving, not saying that's
he'll
gonna
get
happen,
Arch one way or another. Huh?
I'm just saying there's that possibility. But no, I think Lane Kiffin's looking beyond some of these schools that he would have been over backwards for 3 years ago. Yeah, I mean he would have easily left FAU for Auburn. This wouldn't even been a question. But people were afraid to gamble on him, and now look, he's putting together some fantastic seasons. So,
right.
I want one last question on this one, Mike. How many years? Because obviously you're predicting a lot of things. I don't see Lane Kiffin quitting any time, or Nick Saban quitting anytime soon. Looks fantastic, blowing out his 95th birthday candles the other day. A lot of fire in there. But how long do you think we see Kiffin in Ole Miss? Because I don't see Jimbo Lee. Now I may be wrong, but I don't see that job opening up. I don't see Bama opening up. I don't see LSU opening up. Some of these key schools that have the things that you're saying, fandom and NIL. I don't see any of those opening up at the end of this season. So that's good for Ole Miss, because the longer he's there, the more likely you keep him.
Right. Well, to be honest, Shane, you're asking me a question. There's no way I could possibly answer it, but here's maybe something you consider. And maybe this is a reach, but I do know his daughter. He's very close with his daughter. She's about to graduate and enroll in college. She's going to Ole Miss, Shane. So I think if he stays there for this offseason, he may just stay the entire time she's there. I mean, I think that's reasonable to us. Not that she couldn't leave, or not that she wouldn't go to school with him not being there, but I think that's a reasonable assumption. I think he would love to stay close to his daughter and be there. Yeah. So for 4 more seasons, I mean, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you can't look at that and say that's a bad deal,
Yeah. Well, I mean, he named his son Knox, and he turned us down, so, I mean... Kelly took his daughter out of Notre Dame, didn't he? So I don't know. I'm messing with you. It's ifs and buts. It's funny because all these names. This is what we like about coaching hires. We can play all these scenarios that go through, but I think Auburn's gonna take their time. They're gonna make the right move. I can't see Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss for that job right now. But there are some other interesting names. You mentioned Dion. I don't know if that's in the cards. He'd be entertaining, but you're going to hear that. All these groomers, as we used to call them up here in Tennessee.
So I got one more little topic here, Shane, I wanted to hit on before we get to our interview with Mike Griffith. I think you'll like this one. But I have ranked the coaches here, Shane. Who needs a win the most this weekend in the SEC? And you could let me know if you disagree, because there's a couple of these, Shane, I'm just taking right off the table because they don't. Nick Saban, he's top of the list.
Yeah,
he could lose this. He could lose by 100. And I'm not necessarily saying this is like hot seat but momentum of the program. It's kind of all of it. So however you want to look at this, who needs a win the most this weekend? I'm taking Nick Saban off the table because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm taking Brian Kelly off the table. He's in year 1. He's a huge underdog at home. It'd be great if he got the win, but there's no pressure, I don't think, to win this matchup necessarily. Kirby, I'm taking off the table. He's top 2 coach in the country, just won a title. Josh Heupel, I'm taking off the table. I mean, a win will be massive, but if Tennessee lost, the fan base is not going to be mad at Josh Heupel. And then last, Cadillac Williams, interim at Auburn. There's no pressure or, none of these guys. It'd be great for Cadillac to get this win, build some momentum. Maybe he can keep that job. I don't know how realistic that is, but I don't even think he's a realistic candidate at this point in time. So I'm taking him off the table. Do you have an issue with any of those I just named? Nick Saban, Brian Kelly, Kirby Smart, Josh Heupel, Cadillac Williams.
I mean, I guess you could keep Caddy on there because he is trying to win that job. But no, other than that, I have no problem with where you're going here. I think that makes sense.
Okay, so now here we're getting to the guys that I think really could use a win. And I'm going to go...
Are you going... Okay, I was going to ask you...
Go least needing a win first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So number 1 on my board, Clark Lee, Vanderbilt. And again, they're not going to fire him if they don't beat South Carolina at home. But this is a team that you came closest to beating last year in the SEC. It's a home game. South Carolina's coming off a devastating loss. Fans are upset. Offense is sputtering. You've had 2 weeks to prepare. If you're going to get an SEC win, this is probably your best bet the rest of the season. So I think Clark Lee, I think we got to put him right here on this list. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good spot for him. We knew this rebuild was going to take a little bit longer than most, but, I still think it's a pivotal game because, like you said, there's not too many opportunities that you have a chance to be a one-score, underdog in an SEC matchup. An SEC win would be huge for that company. So, but again, you drop it. I don't think that they're not going to fire you after this game. So, yeah, at least pressured easily, Coach Lee.
Okay, how about number 2 on my list, Shane? Eli Drinkwitz, coming off the big win on the road. First ranked win, I believe, on the road in your Missouri career. You're hosting Kentucky. You'd love to get a win. The spread, I believe it opened 3.5, something like that. It's down to 0.5 So, I mean, about even money on this. A lot of people got expectations for Missouri. You could lose this game and still make a bowl game, but if you win it, you almost lock up a bowl season. And a program like Missouri that's building, that's got a lot of young talent, you got to get that postseason to keep that momentum going and get an extra month of practices with your team. So I think Drink, this is a big one for him.
Yeah, it is a big game. In fact, that's why I may move him up the list just a little bit here because you are finally getting that momentum. You're putting some of those ugly losses you had earlier in the season behind you, and you're using South Carolina as a launching pad, and all that could come crumbling down if you drop this one this week because it is a pick 'em, and it could go either way. So I would probably lean more toward Billy Napier or something like that, Florida, than I would Eli. I just think at the start of the season there were rumors circling around that this potentially could be his final season in Columbia. And I think, the more victories he can put under his belt, the less talk we're going to have in the offseason.
Yeah, you might be right, Shane. All right, next on my list, Shane, Mark Stoops, Kentucky. You just got whipped by a team your fan base hates. We're out here, a disappointing season, one of the most disappointing teams in the SEC this season. Again, you lose this one. This is one everybody and their mother had penciled in as a W during the offseason. Looks like a complete toss-up now. If you're losing games on the road at Missouri, you're, 9 years into your program here. They're, just still building up there at Missouri. I think this would be a rough look for Mark Stoops, particularly with a game with Georgia coming up here soon. I mean, there's going to be more losses if you lose to Missouri, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And just how they lost last week, still fresh on a lot of people's memories here. People are talking already about his contract. I've seen it more online this year than I've ever seen it, and we've even made it part of our show. But yeah, they're just tired of the excuses up there in Lexington, even though they've got a handful of them. But all SEC teams have gone through injuries and aches and ailments and things like that. So you can't really just lean in on. You can't keep making excuses, and it didn't seem like he's been doing that this week. It almost feels like he's put the chips toward the center of the table, which could be even worse if that backfires on you.
Now, next on my list, Shane, Sam Pittman, Arkansas, hosting a ranked team. We'll see if they're really top 25 in Liberty, but this is more about Hugh Freeze coming into Arkansas, a place he knows well. You're a 14-point favorite. You're trying to build momentum towards the second half of the season before you jump back in to conference play. I don't want to call this a must-win, but, I mean, it kind of is if you're trying to have a solid season. They're not going to fire him. The program's not going under if you lose this one, but this would be a very, very, very tough loss for that fan base to stomach. So I think there's pressure on Sam Pittman and company to win this weekend. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. And I would give him more pressure just because of what's looming behind this game. You've got two ranked opponents in LSU and Ole Miss. Arkansas has shown you sometimes that they can spiral a little bit if things don't go their way. So this is a very losable game because I do think that you're going to see the best of Hugh Freeze that you've seen in a long, long time because he is auditioning for an SEC gig. So you come in ill-prepared, he'll make you pay. So I don't think Arkansas is going to lose this game, but it is one of those that you just, I don't know, if they don't come in ears pinned back and ready to roll, they could find themselves on the wrong side of that win-loss column.
Right. Now, next on my list, you already mentioned
Hey,
him.
Mike, I want to ask you though, if that does happen, and we're devil's advocate here. I love Sam Pittman. I'd love to interview him sometime and hang out with him. Great guy. Love what he's doing in Arkansas. But if he loses this one, and potentially Ole Miss and LSU, 3 more losses on this team, I mean, is there any hot seat talk, or is this just, we're chalking this up for a bad season? I don't want to get on the bad side,
He
but
just signed a contract extension.
Oh, well, that's true. I forgot about that.
No, I'm not putting him on the hot seat, but again, it would be a hugely disappointing season, hell, we've said it already. They can compete with LSU and Ole Miss at home. I really do believe that, but that goes away in an instant if you lose to freaking Liberty at home, because there's a wide gap between LSU and Ole Miss and Liberty. So you have to get this one.
Absolutely.
Now, you already mentioned this one, Shane. Maybe now that you kind of talked me into it, I probably should have put him a little bit higher, as in not that much pressure. But Billy Napier, Florida, for the simple fact they're on the road, A&M. That's a tough environment, but I kind of put him this far down the list, Shane, just because you're trying to avoid that 1-5 SEC start. That would just be so unlike a Florida Gators a program to be that dreadful in SEC play. I just feel like he needs to stop the bleeding and get him an upset on the road to, not that he's losing support or anything, but man, with guys getting kicked off the tee, with reporters running their mouth, I mean, this feels like a program that desperately needs a win, in my opinion.
I think so too. And looking at their schedule, this is a team that I saw potentially winning out, creating some of that momentum into the offseason. I still love where their recruiting class is. Billy, there was not high expectations coming into the season. That will change next year. But it would be nice. I think it would be. That's why I have him a little bit lower on the list. Is just because I don't think it's a must win, but it would be nice for them to close out the season 4-0. And I think that just creates a lot more momentum on the recruiting trail and then selling the future of this program.
Right. And then next on my list, Shane, Mike Leach, Mississippi State. Man, we love the Pirate. And, I think he gets unfairly criticized for being a little weird, and maybe they drop a game here or there they shouldn't, but what fans seem to forget is they win games here or there that they shouldn't, particularly on the road. I mean, they're a dangerous team, but it is fair to say we got to choose the other side as well. We hype this team up. They have fallen short of expectations. You sit here and lose at home to Auburn with an interim coach. Man, that'd be a rough look. And you got some big games here. Georgia's coming up. Ole Miss is coming up. If you can't beat Auburn with a fired coach, I don't know if you're going to win any of those games. And I saw a stat, Shane, interim coaches this season 5-2 in their first game. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything for this ball game, but clearly what that says is, a lot of these teams get fired up and they fight hard for a new coach. So could be a really tight ball game. Auburn at Mississippi State. Mike Leach needs a win.
That's right. And Cadillac's a player's coach, man. And if anybody's going to get the most out of that locker room, it's definitely going to be him. He's going to get the most from the fans because he's a true legacy down there. So I think that's a dangerous situation that the Pirate finds himself in, and they can't afford to lose it. You're a two touchdown favorite. I think it's more for the optics, because if this is dropped, they are going to drag you through the mud on ESPN. They're going to drag you through the mud on SEC. Old Paul Feinbaum's going to talk about you for 2 days and can't believe you lost. And that's the last thing Mississippi State needs, especially with, losing the AD. It's like, just we don't want to create that narrative. They still are building something special up there. Obviously, the season hasn't gone as planned, but you have an opportunity to rebound and show the country that, hey, we're good, we're in good shape. We'll be fine. But the wheels fall off if you lose to Auburn this weekend.
Now we're at the top two, Shane. These guys, man, do they need a win in the worst way? Shane Beamer, number 2 on my list, and this is, a culmination of things. I still think he's doing a great job. I still think he's the right man for the job. Clearly, we don't have to rehash all the Marcus Satterfield. He came out here and said on Wednesday, Shane, that they didn't even run the plays they've been practicing. They never got to them. And he said that's a good thing, because we could use those for the next game.
We were saving them for Vanderbilt.
You talk
playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. I like it.
We got caught this past week. We had 4 possessions in the first half. We had 3 and out, or 5 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and then a 16-play drive. So the 16-play drive was a lot of 2-minute tempo stuff. So you go in at halftime and you've done nothing from a game plan standpoint of setting up anything. You can't stay out there long enough. So we didn't get to a lot of the plays that we had practiced all week, which could be good or bad, because now we can carry them over and work them this week.
You talk about the optics, Shane, losing to Vanderbilt, being the one to finally get defeated by Vanderbilt. Man, that would just be a horrible look. And I'm not saying that you fire him or anything like that, but it just would be, you would be the laughing stock of college football if that happened. So this is a must win for Shane Beamer's program.
Absolutely, man. And it's a night game. Everybody's at home. If Alabama and LSU doesn't turn out to be a ball game, they may switch it over to you guys getting smoked by Vanderbilt.
Right.
So I'm not saying that's going to happen. Calm down, Gamecock fans. We're talking worst. Who cannot afford a loss? It is Shane Beamer right now, because because what they did last week, they just absolutely put up a goose egg, and they shit the bed on that thing, and now everybody knows that South Carolina is no longer a top 25 team, and now the media is ready to pile in and pile up on you. Mm-hmm. That's the problem when you talk shit like this in the off season and during the season, and you get everybody pumped up. If you mess up, they're going to be the first ones that point at you. So you cannot afford to lose to Vanderbilt, buddy. You cannot, because it is not going to be pretty.
So last and certainly
there'll be a coach fired. It won't be Beamer, but there'll be somebody fired if they lose to Vanderbilt.
Yeah. Well, so then we only got one left, and you know who it is, Shane. Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, his record's starting to look like Brian Harsin, who they just ran off. You just can't lose at home to a first-year Billy Napier, 1-4 in the SEC. I don't care how many injuries you got. You still got a better roster than what Florida's got coming all the way to College Station. Must win for Jimbo Fisher. Again, this doesn't mean they're going to fire him right after the game or anything like that, but God, they need to stop the bleeding. They need to build some momentum. They've got a young quarterback. They got some nice pieces. Build you some momentum going into the offseason. You just can't go in it with, we beat UMass towards the tail end of the stretch. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have something beyond that.
Brother, this is a must win. It is a absolute must win, because if you drop this one, Mike, you have got to win out. LSU's sitting there at the tail end of your schedule, and right now I see no way that Texas A&M can hang with LSU Tigers. And to go from being top 6 in the country to not getting 6 at the end of the game, at the end of the season, and missing a bowl, Shoo, wait, how can you keep him employed? I don't give a shit how much you owe him. It's like we're going to get rid of him. We'll find us a high school coach down there in Texas that will take $100,000. They'll end up winning. You know what I'm saying? They'll be fine. But I would just for the principle alone, there is so much pressure on Jimbo Fisher this weekend because there was a glimpse of hope last week. We got to see a little bit of an offense, which was nice for a change. And if that falls backwards, then we're already out, but man, they're going to be really out.
Yeah, I smell a Honda Morristown coming up. I don't know about you, brother.
Jeez Louise, I can't believe it. Some of the stuff you said today, I did not hear the comments about we didn't even use those plays. How do you even let that get out? You know what I'm saying?
And he said it at a press conference. This was not a hot mic situation.
No, he repeated it, doubled down on it. Golly, some of these coaches, they need a class. It's many. Anyway, I can get rambling. You don't want me doing that. My sugar's high enough already.
Yeah, exactly. Before you go too far down that road, let's kick it over to our interview. Mike Griffith previewing this Tennessee at Georgia football game and all over the SEC, all kinds of topics we hit with Mike. So let's kick it over to this one. Well, we're pleased to once again be joined by Mike Griffith. Of course, he works for the AJC's DawgNation. Give him a follow at Mike Griffith 32. Thanks for joining us, Mike, during this busy week. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Everywhere you go, the game surrounds you. I've been up here in Knoxville doing some work from the Tennessee side of it, and what Tennessee's saying about Georgia, and of course monitoring all the stuff coming out of Georgia, all of Kirby's press conferences, and the build-up it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun this week, and it certainly promises to be an exciting game.
Yeah, well, before we get to not only the game of the week in the SEC, but really the country, I did want to ask you this real quick. Georgia's coming off the big win over Florida. Billy Napier in his first year. If he loses, Mike, on Saturday, he's an underdog at A&M. He's going to be 1-5 to start his career in the SEC as a head coach. Do you think Billy Napier is the man for the job down there in Gainesville? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's probably too early to make that call. When you hire a coach, you got to give him 2 or 3 years, I think. That said, I've seen coaches come in and fare really well. When Billy Napier beat Utah, I thought that was a really big win because, as coaches have to kind of earn the trust of their fan base and get more runway. Kind of like I think what Brian Kelly's done. I think when Brian Kelly came in, I don't think he was as well received as Billy Napier. I think there was a lot more people he had to prove something to, and I think he's proven it. Regardless of how the season turns out for LSU, we've seen some really big wins, and I think he had a more challenging situation in some respects than Billy Napier. Billy Napier's got an incredible quarterback in Anthony Richardson, albeit one that's still developing. I think this is a big game for him. I really do. I think it's a big game for Billy Napier and for Jimbo Fisher. And Billy Napier's got Vanderbilt left and Florida State, I believe. I think that Florida State game is important. That's an opportunity for him to win that game, and if he can get the Gators into a bowl game and beat Florida State, Mike, to me that's kind of a bare minimum of what you want. If Florida's not in a bowl and loses to Florida State, that would really be not good. But I'm still kind of on the fence. I've heard good things about Billy Napier. And I've seen some things with his coaching that I've wondered about a little bit. I saw a lot of 3rd and long runs against Georgia, which I didn't understand. You got Anthony Richardson back there. I'm sure there's a method to his madness. What he does on the recruiting trail is also important. So that's a pretty long answer to say that the jury's out.
Well, from one former Saban assistant to another, I'm really enjoying these interviews you're doing, Mike, with Jeremy Pruitt over at DawgNation. I love watching it on YouTube. How did that all come about, and how interesting is it that we all know Pruitt, it didn't work out as a head coach, but he's still one of the best defensive minds in the country. He knows Georgia. He knows Tennessee. I just thought it was fantastic getting his insights into this big game. How did that all come about, you interviewing Jeremy Pruitt every week?
Yeah, well, Jeremy's the guy that, I covered Tennessee when that coaching change occurred. And so one of my assignments was to go down to the national championship game where Jeremy finished up as the defensive coordinator, and they were playing Georgia in 2017, and connected with Jeremy there, and it really covered him through the whole off season. Went to a lot of the, they have these, Tennessee has all these big orange caravan stops, and I'd go to those, and I knew Jeremy through a lot of people. Mike, I go back to the 90s. I covered Alabama, and I covered the Alabama team that Jeremy was a part of. And, I knew Freddie Kitchens really well and Will Friend. Those were Jeremy roommates. Jeremy was on those Alabama teams. And I also knew one of the coaches that coached the scout team. It was the running backs coach, and he was tight. So we knew a lot of the same people from Alabama from my time down there. I didn't know Jeremy when he was on the team because he was like, second team safety, a kickoff guy. He only played really 1 or 2 seasons after transferring from MTSU. So I never really knew Jeremy there, but we know a lot of the same people. And then when he came up to Tennessee and was the head coach, I had a really good relationship with him because that's what you do when you're a beat writer. And when you say really good relationship, I don't think fans can really understand it. You're not friends with these guys. You don't go to their houses. Nobody's sending anybody any cards. Okay. It just means a professional relationship where they understand you've got to ask questions, and they appreciate that you give them an opportunity to answer without just making some blind comment or putting something on social media. It's a professional relationship. And again, I know some fans don't understand that. They, this guy loves it. No, you really don't. When the job's done and you go somewhere else and they go somewhere else, nobody's sending any Christmas cards, okay? But you got to have a professional relationship. And I had that with Jeremy, and he appreciated the way I asked questions, and he appreciated that I was fair about what I wrote. People remember that. And so, I reached out to have him on last summer on a podcast, and he agreed to do it. I thought it went really well. And then once this season started, I had him on the first week, and it went really well, asking him about games around the league. And I said, hey, you want to do that again? Yeah, well, sure. And it just kind of became something fun because, Jeremy knows a lot about football. As you said, he worked side by side with Kirby Smart for 6 years on that Alabama staff. I think he worked for Nick himself 11 years. He worked under Jimbo Fisher at Florida State for 2 years. He won a national championship there. He coached at Georgia for 2 years under Mark Richt, so he knows that the Georgia territory and understands the Georgia community that watches that On the Beat show every Monday night. So I think it just made a lot of sense. I think there's a trust there. I think he likes working with me. I like working with him. I think he's, fun on the podcast. All that other stuff, Tennessee and NCAA. Look, that's business, and that's Jeremy's business, and that's Jeremy's life, and he's got to settle that however he feels is best. But in the meantime, life doesn't stop. Jeremy still watches football. Jeremy still loves football. Jeremy will be back in football. So why not have him on, and why not talk about these games? And so that's what we do.
Well, so let's shift gears to the game. Mike, Nolan Smith, we all know by now, out for the season. That's a tough break for Georgia. How big of a loss will that be for this Bulldog defense going into what looks to be their toughest matchup of the season going against this Tennessee offense?
Well, it is a big loss. It is the sacks leader, and Nolan's kind of an emotional leader. I always compared Nolan to a Raptor. This guy can really close on quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker is, I don't want to say thanking his lucky stars, but you knew where number 4 was lined up, right? This is a guy that caused problems next to Will Anderson, probably the preeminent pass rusher in the league. Robert Beal steps in. Robert's a veteran, actually led the team in sacks last year. And while Robert maybe doesn't have the same burst closing speed, I think he plays the run really well. I think he's a very capable guy. I think he's a guy that's going to play in the NFL. Robert would, when they go 3-4, he's the, fourth linebacker. So he played a lot of snaps as well, where we've seen, Nolan played. You look at the snap distribution, Robert played a lot of snaps. He played more snaps than Nolan. So he's a capable guy. He's not as dynamic, but he's capable. He had a sack last year against Tennessee, and he had 2 quarterback hurries. So this is a guy that can be effective. This is part of what makes Georgia so good and why they're a championship contender. They have championship depth, and, Mike, it's interesting. Actually, Georgia lost their sacks leader last year after the Florida game. You remember Adam Anderson had the off-the-field issues and was suspended. And the next man up was Robert Beal, ironically enough. So Georgia's been here before. They've got a capable guy. It's going to test their depth. There's some young guys behind Robert that are going to need to play more snaps. Chaz Chambliss being one of them. Maybe MJ Sherman been in the program a minute, but Georgia's got some capable guys. So I don't think it's enough to say it changes the outcome of the game, but I think it maybe makes things a little bit easier for Tennessee in the pass game, but not in the run game.
Now, is this you've been down there on the beat covering the Georgia Bulldogs for a number of years. Is this the biggest game that you've covered in Athens?
Well, I mean, yes, it certainly appears to be. I mean, it's a battle of two number one teams. Now, I will say when Georgia played host to Notre Dame in 2019, that was a really big deal, right? I mean, that was a really big deal, a battle of two top 10 teams. We hadn't seen that in Athens in a non-conference game in a long time. And anytime Notre Dame comes, obviously, the national spotlight, I believe that was one of the night games. What was it, Mike? They can only use 2 night games a year. Was it CBS that can only use 2 night? There was some exemption that can only be used rarely, and I know there were some Alabama fans that were miffed that Alabama LSU wasn't going to be a night game because they chose Georgia Notre Dame. The TV people basically told everyone how important it was, and it was a classic. It was an instant classic. It came right down the last minute, and the Sanford Stadium crowd really made a difference. I don't normally say that. Because I don't think crowds usually make a difference. I know they like to think they do, but I really don't think they do. But that night they did. There was like 6 false starts on Notre Dame, and it was a 1-possession game, and you go, you know what? Neutral site, Notre Dame probably wins. I wonder if Sanford Stadium can make that kind of a difference against Tennessee with the hurry up, and how the game goes will dictate that. But yeah, I mean, you got 2 number one teams playing, and honestly, Mike, I know that we're in this playoff age where there's 4 teams, and you can, if you're a fan of a team, you can justify some scenario. Well, we can lose and still, you know what? I don't think so. I think it's lose or out, man. I don't think if Tennessee or Georgia loses that they have much of a path to the college football playoff because of their schedules. I mean, and I also think the SEC's down this year. I know that is a really unpopular thing to say. And even though it's down this year, it's still the best conference, by the way. It'll still produce the most number of draft picks. But, I don't think Alabama is what we thought Alabama would be. I don't even think Alabama is what they were in the latter stages of last year, once that offense got going and that defense really grew up. I mean, I think Alabama's been a disappointment this year. Shoulda, woulda, coulda lost to Texas A&M. Shoulda, woulda, coulda lost to Texas. Mismanaged the clock and blew the game against Tennessee. I still don't see any receivers there that are anywhere near as effective as what we saw last year at Alabama. So Alabama's not what we thought. LSU, obviously, new coach. That program was, kind of sunk into disarray, but it's not a typical LSU team. I mean, Brian Kelly's trying to get it there. You talked about Florida earlier in the show, and, Florida's been kind of a, disappointment, I think. I mean, as good as Anthony Richardson is, I mean, speaking of having no receivers or playmakers, and Kentucky, I mean, it's basketball season, number 1, and number 2, they turned out to really, just roll over and play dead. I mean, I know that was one of your hot teams, Mike, so I know that one hurt you, but man, you had to be as surprised as I was when they got beat like a drum by South Carolina and then losing 44. I mean, just at least make it respectable. Will Levis doesn't even get 100 yards rushing and throws 3 picks. I mean, Kentucky's got to be the most disappointing team in the league. I mean, goodness gracious, utter disappointment. Texas A&M, I mean, we all thought, well, Jimbo Fisher and 5 stars, and they've been garbage. How many games in a row have they lost now? I mean, I guess if we're talking about Ole Miss, I guess they're okay, but they got beat like a drum by LSU, and they got Alabama coming up. So that's when I say the SEC's down. I mean, I kind of, but and yet, Georgia beats Oregon 49-3, right? And Oregon looks like a pretty good football team. So coming back full circle to you, the thing that I'd be worried about if I'm Georgia or Tennessee and my team loses is, does TCU run the table? They're not going to keep out an undefeated Power 5 conference champion over a 1-loss non-SEC championship participant. It's not going to happen. So you're going to need TCU to lose. You're going to need Clemson to lose, right? You're going to need Michigan or Ohio State to stumble a second time, because I think that Michigan has earned a little bit of street cred, even though Georgia destroyed them in the Orange Bowl. I think Michigan has looked better. I think C.J. Stroud, listening to the committee talk last night, and, even though we can look at the statistics and say, hey, wait a minute, Georgia actually has better offensive numbers than Ohio State. Yeah, but they don't have C.J. Stroud, right? They don't have a Heisman guy. I mean, let's face it, ratings sell, Mike. And those are human beings in that room. Those are 13 human beings that are affected, by their feelings and by their thoughts. And like a jury, they can be won over, by a convincing witness, right? They can be won over by a convincing quarterback. And if we're really talking about the beauty contest and you put C.J. Stroud up against Stetson Bennett, regardless of what the statistics might say, they're going to take C.J. Stroud. When they talked about the teams, they mentioned C.J. Stroud by name. They didn't mention Stetson Bennett. So, think about that. And Georgia doesn't have the same offensive sex appeal, even though the numbers tell you that they're really more efficient than anyone. They're the best in the nation on third downs. They're the best at red zone proficiency and scoring. They're the best in the number of first downs. And yet we had to hear C.J. Stroud's name last night. So that just kind of tells you what you're up against. Georgia's got to win or they're out. I think Tennessee has a slight chance because they have played a little bit beefier schedule than Georgia. Not Georgia's fault that some of these teams turned out to be crap. I mean, Kent State was supposed to be the best team in the MAC. They're not. When Georgia only beat them, that was an ugly win. Missouri, capable, but they don't have a lot of wins. That's going to hurt Georgia. They were down 10 points to that team, one of the lousiest teams in the league. That hurts your resume. I'm sorry, it does. So I think this game is very important in terms of the playoff repercussions.
All right, final thing I got for you, Mike. How many points is it going to take, do you think, to win this football game? And maybe you just tipped your hand a little bit there, but what's your confidence level that Stetson Bennett can lead Georgia to a win if it does turn into a shootout and he's got to go score for score with Hendon Hooker?
Well, Mike, you put it like that. Now, come on, you're setting me up here. You're asking me about you're putting Hendon Hooker up against Stetson Bennett. Now, come on, that's not fair. There's the defenses count too. Okay, so I think Georgia has a better defense than Tennessee. I don't think I'd be offending anyone by saying that, right?
Right.
I think I did offend some people last year, and I apologize to those people in advance because they may be offended again. But I suggested last year that Georgia would trade Stetson Bennett for Hendon Hooker if they could. I said that. I want to apologize to anybody who's offended or disrespected by that. I know that wasn't a popular thing to say last year, but I think it's true. And I don't think there's any shame in that, Mike. I think Hendon Hooker has had an exceptional season. I mean, Hendon Hooker's got 21 touchdowns and 1 interception, maybe 22 touchdowns and 1 interception. And Stetson's got 9 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in an offense that's been designed around him with pass catchers like Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington. So I'm not trying to be ugly here. Now, Stetson Bennett has improved as the quarterback, and he's worked very hard, and he's deserving of everything he gets. And I enjoy interviewing him. He's a bright guy. I enjoy his passion and his resiliency. I want to be really clear because sometimes people take it personal when you make professional assessments of players as players, not people. So I don't want to hurt any feelings, Mike. I hesitate, but you asked me that question in a way that I feel compelled to share with you that I think Hendon Hooker would be the preferred quarterback. Again, I hope nobody's feelings are hurt here because people got really mad last year, really, really mad. People who write blogs that you would have never heard of, suddenly tape record interviews and write stories about Mike Griffith said that. Well, here's why I'm saying it. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that, I don't hate Georgia football because I think Hendon Hooker is a preferred quarterback. So all that said, I got to be, like I said, I want to be very clear on that, Mike, because fans got really, really mad. But I think Hendon Hooker is very good. And the difference is, though, I think Georgia has great safety play with Christopher Smith and Malachi Starks. And I think that's the difference in the game, is that Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann, this is the best defensive coaching staff in the country. And I believe Todd Monken is a brilliant play caller. He'll maximize Stetson Bennett. And the good news for Georgia is if Stetson doesn't have a great game, they have answers. Carson Beck is ready to play. They can run the ball effectively. Georgia has answers. So that's what it all boils down to for me, is that if things don't work out for Tennessee with Hendon Hooker and throwing the ball and in playing hurry up, I don't think there's a plan B that beats Georgia. But if Georgia can't do this A, or Georgia can't do B, or this player can, there's another player that can, or there's another scheme that can, or there's another way, for Kirby Smart to get it done. I think that's why Georgia probably wins this football game, maybe by 3-7. How many points will that take, Mike? I mean, how does the game called in the secondary? It's like an umpire's strike zone. Could it get up into the 30s? Yeah, maybe. I kind of feel a 31-28 or a 33-26 or maybe a 37-30 game coming on. But I'm inclined to think that Georgia slows Tennessee down a little bit. Boy, that's a dangerous thing to say. Somebody's going to get that soundbite and play it over and over if Tennessee puts more than 40 on them. But I just have a feeling that this Tennessee defense, this Georgia defense is so well coached, and Kirby Smart does such a good job, and these safeties are so good. Jeremy Pruitt said this, and I know you heard this, Mike. When I asked Jeremy on the podcast, do you think that Georgia can learn anything from the Alabama tape? And he said, yeah, he learned that that's not the game plan to go with. He said they can learn what not to do. So I'm going to take Jeremy's word for that. And those are my I don't have a final pick or anything. And this game really could go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't have a whole lot of conviction in one team or the other. I just think it's going to be a great game, and with two really good quarterbacks and two really good coaching staffs.
All right, he's Mike Griffith. Give him a follow at Mike Griffith 32. Don't forget to check out all his work, DawgNation, from the AJC and the YouTube channel, of course. Mike, thank you so much.
All right, have a good one, Mike. I really appreciate it.
All right, buddy. So, hey, once again, just want to say thanks to Mike Griffith. He's one of the true pros in the SEC. Yeah. He's always been good to us. Been on the show a number of times throughout the years. But that's all I got on this show, brother. You got anything before we hop off the line?
No. Again, another great show. It's this is the weekend. The more we talk about it, the more I'm putting it on a pedestal, brother, from start to finish. There's just not enough hours in the day. I wish I could watch each game individually. But this is one we're going to be talking about for years to come. I truly think so. I think this weekend shapes college football playoffs. It shapes the SEC championship, and it's put up or shut up time, man. And I'm here for it. Every bit of it, brother. I can't get enough of.
Well, brother, I appreciate you. As always, appreciate each and every one of you for checking us out. And if you haven't already, give us that 5-star written review on the Apple Podcast app, or on Spotify, or subscribe to us on YouTube, and we'll send you a beer koozie free of charge. We got all 14 SEC teams represented by koozies. Just reach out to us at thatsecpodcast@gmail.com. Send us over your review, and we will send you one of them beer koozies for free. So just wanted to get that in there, brother. I appreciate you. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. See you guys. Go Vols.